We are ethos plus because of our authors, editors, our supporters. There are influencers here. I think we saw some influencers plus some influencer-like person. I actually thought a person was an influencer, but he said maybe it's because I look young. So, yeah. So I think I would like Connie to tell you more about this book, the genesis of it in a while. Margie will then do a panel discussion later, right? But for now, maybe I want to make a note about place. 6 years ago, we launched the Art of Advocacy, which was in this book. But that space actually, I think today we won't be able to launch there. So I think if you look at the synopsis on the back cover of the new book, the socio-political lines are always shifting in Singapore. So I don't think it's always going to retreat. Sometimes it will also advance. So I think the people in this room, I think we are all committed to listening, and maybe some of us will be in a position and with the resources to open up spaces. So I think that's really important because nationalization, privatization, sometimes the public space is very contested, but we are also a force that we can sort of agitate for certain spaces as well. Yeah, so I think today, really happy to introduce, first of all, Connie. Let me introduce Connie as a writer and civil society activist. She has led women organizations, co-founded civil society groups, been a columnist in national publications, and co-edited many books. Her nonfiction works include Representing Singapore Women, 2004, The Art of Advocacy with Margie, which is in 2017. She has written 2 memoirs, including Never Leave Home Without Your Chili Sauce, 2016, and 3 children's books. She was inducted into the Singapore Women's Hall of Fame in 2015. A warm round of applause to Connie. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Kage. Thank you all for coming and welcome. I imagine that Ethos has done a good job of publicizing this book and this launch, but I also suspect that the title of the book might have attracted a lot of people as well. And so anyway, thank you. I have to say thank you to the contributors who have been very generous when we call for contributions. They have been very generous in accepting our call. I want to also thank Ho Pang and Waihan, because they were responsible for starting this whole series, not a series yet, it's just 2 books. This first book. And now we have Kage and his team, and it was such a pleasure to work with them. Thank you very, very much, and for working on this book. One of the things that is very touching is to have a publisher pay attention to civil society activism and civil society. And I would include publishers such as Ethos and Kage as part of our civil society. Now, the collection of essays in these 2 books tell our stories of civil society. We have tried to be inclusive as we could. If we have failed in some way, it is not for want of trying. We have tried to get everybody in these two books, our 2 collections, to include all organizations and all individuals who have been part of civil society. Examining the history recorded in these 2 books, the history of politics, social media, changes in the law, the writers remind us, readers, that there are many different ways of being activists, that success is possible, that inertia is not a response to encounters with our state. The more people engage, the faster the changes are likely to happen. And you know, civil society is supposed to work in partnership with the state. And we are also supposed to have a positive relationship with the state. You know that it's not always easy. In fact, sometimes it's very difficult. And not just the government, but many people, many Singaporeans view civil society as hostile to the state, which is why Margie and I offer this as a title to the book. We are not, what's happened to the, I turn around to look at it and it's not there. Okay, we are not the enemy. And in fact, what I would like to say is, we thought it was an appropriate response to the way government views civil society activism. Actually, my response is, and I don't think my other editor would have approved, for heaven's sake, grow up. We are not the enemy, but people who have, I have another sentence which I won't say. You may well be our enemy of the people. Anyway, this book tells you that activism does make a difference, that it does help change our culture. These books enlighten, educate, inspire with the stories of experiences of different ways of being and doing as involved citizens. The variety of ways in which you can be engaged, be an engaged citizen, an activist will surprise you, as I have been surprised by the contributors of this book. 40 years ago, when Margie and I started on this road, there were just a few of us, Aware and Nature Society. Slowly, the community of activists have grown, and as has the issue activists are involved in. Now, another important launch of the book is this book, the red book that you all have as a free copy. This one. It's produced by CAPE. And I don't know members of CAPE. I don't know who have contributed. Are you here? Come on, stand up. This is a book that in 1995, when we had organized TWC1, one of the recommendations we made was to have a public education program and a handbook. It's taken 30 years for the dream to come together, and I'm so happy. You have put in so much work. Thank you so very much. It is a much needed, important addition to civil society activism and to all of us who are considering being activists or not. And so if you want to get involved but know not how to go about it, those who think activism is a waste of their time and effort, and people who think that activists are enemies of the state, I recommend that you read these books. Finally, I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be part of this book project and to be an activist. I resisted, and I have always resisted, and I suggest those of you who are not involved, don't sleepwalk through life. Join, become active, and be passionate about your country. Thank you very much.
I'll next introduce the panel, which will be facilitated by Margie. Margaret Thomas. Yeah, so, anyway, you can see that we are all very cozy and comfortable, so let's keep it that way. So, Margaret Thomas was a journalist for more than 25 years at the Business Times, the Singapore Monitor, SPH Asia 1, and Today. She now works primarily on book projects and in various voluntary roles on the pursuit of gender equality and an open, informed, and inclusive society. She was a founder member of AWARE in 1984-85 and has also been involved in civil society organizations and initiatives such as TWC2, the Singapore Women's Hall of Fame, and the Singapore Advocacy Awards. Charin George, born in Singapore in 1965, is a journalist. Right. Okay, anyway. Okay. After studying social and political sciences at Cambridge and journalism at Columbia, he spent the 1990s working at the Straits Times. He received his PhD in communication at Stanford in 2003 and is currently a professor of media studies at Hong Kong Baptist University. He researches media freedom, censorship, and hate propaganda in Asia and around the world. His 9 books include Hate Spin, which was selected by Publishers Weekly as one of the 100 best books of 2016. Wow. Rachel Yeoh has been an integral member of the Pink Dot Organizing Committee since 2019, where she leads external communications efforts and actively engages in government advocacy. Prior to her involvement with Pink Dot, Rachel was a student activist leading a network of university LGBTQ+ groups in campaigns for equitable treatment in schools, organizing allyship workshops, and producing educational resources for LGBTQ+ youth. In her professional capacity, Rachel is a seasoned public affairs and communications consultant, drawing from her experience as a former news anchor and international news producer at Channel News Asia. And we have Corina. Corina Lim has been the executive director of AWARE and since 2010. As a dedicated women's rights activist, she has been an advocate for issues such as the promotion of gender-equal workplaces, the addressing of gender-based violence, and the provision of greater support for single parents and lower-income women. In addition to her advocacy work, she spearheaded the establishment of the Sexual Assault Care Center at AWARE in 2011. Ms. Lim has a master's in public administration from Columbia University and is a Fulbright scholar. She graduated with an LLB from the National University of Singapore and was called to the Singapore Bar in 1988. Yeah. Thank you for being here. I'm very excited to hear Margie now start the ball rolling. Sorry, I didn't acknowledge Zining, also one of my colleagues who was at the door earlier. Yeah, so, yeah.
Okay, hello. I intend to do as little as possible because we're just going to get these guys to talk and say something about what they wrote about the book. And I have a couple of questions. And then knowing that this is a civil society audience, there's no need for other questions because you'll be bursting with points that you want to make, right? And questions you want to ask. And then you'll just be a free flow. At some point, Cape is going to talk about their book.
Yes, at the end of the
okay.
Q&A, after the panel and the Q&A.
All right, it'll just be, when you feel like talking about it, just talk. Right? No need to be so structured. So we're going to start with Rachel. We sort of go girl, boy, girl, so balance. You know. And Rachel.
Hi, everyone. My voice is exceptionally low today because lost my voice over the past week. So sorry if it's not very pleasant to listen to. First of all, I'm glad I'm going first because it'll be very hard to follow them. I've been told to talk about some key takeaways from my essay, and I have them here. So the first takeaway I wanted to highlight is that no organization, no matter how big, can make a social movement go as far as the LGBTQ movement has gone on their own. You need the whole ecosystem, and I think I've tried to underscore that in my essay. Pink Dot, we may enjoy a lot of visibility in the media, and just because the nature of what we do is so hyper visible and so physical. But really, our amazing community groups lend legitimacy to what we do as well. And that's why we have the community tent every year, because it is a powerful representation that what we do, we're not the only ones fighting for this. And I just want to give credit also, now that repeal has come, to the other groups that have agitated for change and the other individuals who have been part of that journey as well. The second takeaway that you might get from my essay is, how Pink Dot and how any group and any social movement has to be flexible and has to be like water to evolve and to survive and to thrive. To evolve in a way that ensures continued relevance. It also means that we have to keep our ear to the ground. We've done it in the past in the way that we've had to navigate changing government regulations when it comes to fundraising, when it comes to who gets to enter the park and who does not. But this need to evolve has become exceptionally pertinent today, post-repeal. Pink Dot, we've had to do plenty of soul searching, after repeal. And I wrote this essay quite a while ago, so it doesn't really capture the journey that we've been on as an organization in the last 6 months. But towards the end of last year, we sat down with our most important stakeholders, our community groups, our sponsors, our participants, and to take stock of how we are perceived, how they view our role in a landscape that's so different from like 2 or even 3 years ago, and to see where we can continue to offer something and continue to push the needle. So having these conversations corrected a lot of our own false beliefs maybe and our assumptions about our role in LGBT advocacy. For example, some of us thought maybe we don't need the event anymore. Some of us actually felt very convicted about that. But then in the process of speaking to our stakeholders, we found out that every single stakeholder group still wants the event and they feel very strongly about the need for the event to carry on. And I think that that's an affirmation of the work that we will continue to do for at least another year. We are knee-deep now in that process of evolving. And we're changing, and we hope that you will do the same with us too. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, thanks so much to Margie, to Connie, and to Ethos for continuing to take an interest in my work, and even more inexplicably thinking that others will be interested. So rather than dwell on my contribution to the book, I'm going to take the liberty of widening my brief to talk about a set of chapters, not just mine, but also those of Ng Kok Ho, who's in the audience, Walid Jumblat Abdullah, who's playing football with his son. I'm serious, that's what he told me. And Kenneth Paul Tan, who's in Hong Kong, my fellow full-time academics. When I read Kok Ho's, Walid's, and Kenneth's essays alongside mine, it struck me that although we have very different interests and have engaged in advocacy in very different ways, we share some basic common values. First, we believe academics should follow our curiosity. and apply our training to help answer socially relevant questions. Second, that academics should be part of wider public conversations and not just confine ourselves to the ivory tower. And third, that our value to our society depends on our independence from power. If academics don't attempt to probe more critically and share ideas more liberally than, say, the civil service or state media, what is our point, really? These are very old-fashioned, traditional ideas about academia, which have been overrun by two contemporary and complementary forces. One is the neoliberalization of higher education globally, which has corrupted the way universities and higher education authorities count academic productivity and impact. Kenneth's chapter has a detailed critique of this trend. The second is the capture of universities by the authoritarian state. The government's position on universities has hardened over the decades. Critical writing is not banned, but you are required to make it so cheap that it's only accessible to grad students and fellow academics within your narrow field. The government does not want leakage such that you influence the general public. It certainly does not want academia and activism to mix, except, of course, pro-establishment activism, which is rewarded. Anti-establishment activism is penalized. Are we therefore the enemy? Right? I must clarify that the title was selected and announced after we submitted our essays. But I did not object, and I don't think any other of the authors objected, because it's a brilliant title, right? If a little overdramatic. It's basically clickbait, right? So do I really think that I'm viewed by the establishment as an enemy of the state? That's an overstatement. It's all relative. And if you want to get analytical about it, and about how the state manages dissenting views, a simple enemy-friend binary probably isn't very helpful. And I think this comes through in all the essays in the book. I have written and spoken before about thinking instead in terms of a black list, a white list, and in between many shades of gray, maybe even 50. Let me tell you a story to illustrate this. It concerns the lawyer M. Ravi, whom for a while you know as really the only lawyer working on high-profile human rights cases. Fortunately, the number of lawyers taking on public interest law has expanded and includes Remy Chu, who's in the audience and who has a chapter in the book. So, a few years ago, I'm at some conference reception, and I bump into an elderly Supreme Court judge whom I'd happened to meet once before. So I smile and nod, and he just ghosts me, right? Walks right by, stone-faced. I thought maybe he just didn't see me. I shrug it off because my ego is quite resilient. But then a while later, he comes up to me with a big smile. And he says, "Oh, I'm sorry, Cherian, I thought you were M. Ravi." True story, really happened. So when I apply my learned critical mind to this, I realize, here's empirical data that shows that Ravi is on the blacklist. I'm somewhere on the gray palette. And you have to imagine, by the way, a kind of a Nippon paint color chart here, ranging from mist gray to charcoal gray. And of course, if you are on the white list, all black and gray people look the same to you. But I don't think it's so straightforward. The black list, I think, is applied in a more total way. The gray list is more situational. You may be considered hazardous in some contexts, but actually accepted in others. There's another important difference. Blacklisting is very top-down, but gray listing, where exactly on the gray spectrum you are, is more socially determined. Many Singaporeans, including people in universities and civil society, are complicit in maintaining individuals on the gray spectrum through their micro-level decisions, like, for example, where to have a book launch, that Kage mentioned earlier. Who is safe to partner with? Who can we trust access and resources to? So we all have a role, even individuals in the room, in either pushing people towards the lighter gray or towards the darker gray. I'd love to elaborate on this during the Q&A, but I'd love even more to hear Corina, so I'll stop here.
Thanks, Sharon. So I think I'm somewhere in the grey list. And I think I've also been complicit. And I think that's one of the tough things about being in civil society in Singapore. I don't know whether it's easier in other countries, but every day I feel like in Aware we have to make some difficult decisions, big and small, who to partner with, what issues to take up, what to say on social media, etc. So that's quite a sort of, something that weighs heavily on all of us who do this work. It is so great, and I'm going to stand up because I want to see the crowd. It's so great to see everyone here. I don't know how hard it was to get a crowd of 250 in the room. I trust it wasn't hard, and this, everything sold out quite quickly. But it's the last venue was probably not as big. I mean, the fact that we probably today couldn't actually use it. This is a better venue because it's got more people. I think I don't know what I'm going to say about my chapter. I said I would go last because I just wanted to riff off other people. Sharon said I prepared my speech. I'm like, shit, I got no speech. But anyway, this is March, and we are sort of the second half of Lent for those who are Catholics. It's also the 15th anniversary of the Aware saga, and the Ides of March. Well, the Aware saga first happened on 28th of March, 2009, and it was, for those, I don't know, how many of you were actually involved in the saga in this room? Quite a number of you. I think you were sitting in the first row as well of in the big EGM. But anyway, this Connie Soin and there's Margie Thomas, and we all fought back for Aware when we were taken over by a group of evangelistic Christians. At that time, we thought, Connie probably thought it was the end of the world. I mean, it was like, she was the first one I spoke to, and she was in tears. It was a very, very difficult and challenging time. And at the time that it happened, we were pretty traumatized. But now I ask you and the people who were involved, if, let's say Margie, if knowing now what has happened in 15 years, and if we could teleport you back to that time and you had the choice to say, okay, I can stop it and I can stop the saga from happening, or I can let it go, I can let it be, what would you choose?
I would not stop it. I would have, encouraged them to continue because it kicked us out of our complacency and it forced us to decide that there's a whole lot more work to be done, and now you're doing it.
I wasn't sure what Margie would have answered, so I took my chances. I would have answered the same thing. The point is that actually civil society thrives from adversity. And, when one reading of the book is, oh my God, it is so hard. And, what brave people, but God, this country sucks. But actually, it also is what makes us grow and what brings us together, and it builds us as a community. So when I think back about those times, and it was really harsh. It was very, very difficult. And we went through ups and downs. We fought with each other, but we always stayed together despite all the differences. And we had some really existential questions as well, like, hey, should we fight back or should we just let people, give them a chance and then see what happens in a year? We had these soul-searching type questions as well, and everything was gray and there was no clear answer. But the lessons that we learned, and this is what I do write in my chapter, number 1, the friendships are really important. That's what kept us together, because we had each other's numbers, and in order for us to actually force an extraordinary general meeting, we needed 10% of the membership to actually sign a petition and say we want to have an extraordinary general meeting. And because we had each other's phone numbers, even though as a group we were all doing our own things in our own lives, and sometimes we didn't meet for years, but when push came to shove, we had those friendships. And that's why these physical meetings, and thanks to Ethos, not just for doing a book, but bringing us together, they are so important. So thank you. COVID was a bit tough. There was it sort of disrupted some of the momentum of civil society gatherings. But I'm glad that, and I hope that there will be more. And it may just seem like we're hanging out, but it's really important because when push comes to shove, we have each other. And the other lesson that I learned is we have to believe in the people. There was only a small group of us that were trying to organize our side. And, the other side saw us as the enemy. We really were the enemy to them. They wanted to take over us, obliterate the feminist agenda, and do their own thing with our organization. So for a while, we were seen as the enemies, and probably for us too, we did see them as the enemies, right? And so there are times when these battle lines are drawn. But, on our side, what we did was we set up a website, we used social media at a time when social media was still quite nascent. We were the number 1 hashtag on Twitter in the world, not just in Singapore, for a day. 2nd of May. But, was in the world. So we did all that, and the people came. So there is a silent majority, or there are people that are silent, that are on our side. They are on the side of good, but they may not respond because they have their own lives to lead, and they may not actually be coming to our events or liking our pages or commenting, etc. But have faith, right? Have faith in Singaporeans. Have faith in the values that we have, because we saw it as aware. And nowadays, when we've made a podcast, this whole thing, if you don't know the history of this, there is no reason why you shouldn't know. The Aware podcast, 12-part series, has this whole story. It's called Saga. Thank you. It's on Spotify, it's on Apple. And when I'm down, and there are times when things get a bit hard, I just tune into one of these episodes. And then I feel like, yeah, I can fight another day. So anyway, the chapter that I resonated most was actually Rachel's. And when I see Rachel, I think of, some time ago I was like Rachel. I was young and then 40 years ahead of this fight before me. And I think the pink dot strategy, there's a lot to learn from it. It is a pure strategic communication strategy, very, very clever and very strategic. My chapter in the first book was called Keep Calm and Play the Long Game. And that's what Pink Dot has done. And I really love it that they have this continuous strategy, right? And they always kept to it. And they didn't fight at the extremes. They actually tried to get that center, which is where you need to be if you want to shift. If you want to shift society, if you want to make a distinct difference in values. Kind of have to play at the center, but it takes longer. And they did it in the most sort of fun way, because, you know, who's not been up to the field on Pink Dot Day? So anyway, I just want to, so those are my comments for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all three. Pink Dot, you surely will go on more than just 1 year. I mean, come on, you've got to play the long game, right?
If I may, we're raising funds now. So
Okay,
if you
well.
want Pink Dot to go on for more than 1 year,
Yeah, I would
please
support Pink Dot.
give as much or as little as you can and want.
I got a couple of questions. Specifically, this blacklist, grey list, right? Pink list.
Sponsored by Nippon Paint.
Yeah. Now, I want to ask all three of you. You can decide who goes first, right? You know, on this clickbait title that we came up with, which is doing exactly what we hope it would do. Okay, so whom exactly do we need to convince that we are not the enemy, and how do we do that? Or a question I like to put to everybody is, who needs to do what to convince whom that all activists are needed in our society?
Let me go first, since I started the ball rolling. Well, I think if you're on the blacklist or the whitelist, as I said, these are top-down decisions. And we know individuals who are blacklisted. And what I mean by blacklisting, it means that really it ceases to be about anything that you actually do or say. Because it's you, it's completely out of the question. Nobody's supposed to partner you. So among my friends and acquaintances that I don't think they would feel insulted, or if I named them on the blacklist, would be people like Jonathan Wham, Kirsten Han, M. Ravi, my doppelganger. Yeah. What do I mean by the white list? The white list are people who, again, irrespective of whether they are in fact at the very top of their professions and have the respect of their peers, they're given permanent seat at the table. So practically all statutory boards and so on, you can't get there if you're not on the white list. And the grey list is capos in between. Yeah. So how does the grey list work? So it usually starts with some expression of official displeasure, right? So of course it starts at the top. So a minister throwing shades, calling somebody names. And the thing is, that may be the end of that, right? It might not actually be pushing you to the blacklist, but that's when the mob takes over, right? Other gatekeepers, and I don't mean just senior civil servants, but also mainstream media editors, event organizers, venue hosts, university administrators, take the hint. Yeah? Even if they respect your work, they might feel that they lose their place in the pecking order. They risk being moved into the gray zone if they are too welcoming of someone who's just been named within the last year as suspicious, right? So they start disinviting academics who've been invited for events, that kind of thing, right? So sometimes even civil society organizations with a lot to lose may make their calculations accordingly. We can't really afford, even though we know this activist or this artist is the best person for the job, it's too risky on that person. We lose too much, yeah? So there's a cost to the individual concerned, but I'm also alarmed about the cost to society, right? Because what the system of political screening produces is a country where across almost all sectors, you see expertise and experience being shunted aside if there's any hint that the individual may upset our extremely thin-skinned political masters. So let me name names, yeah? I mean, of the individuals shunted aside, not of the political masters. We know who they are. So Ng Kok Ho, yeah, an individual with obviously relevant knowledge, has never been asked to join the board of the National Council of Social Services. T. Sasitharan, an author of, an artist of indubitable heft and value, never been asked to join the National Arts Council. Lai Chi-kin, one of our foremost architectural historians, never been asked to sit on the National Heritage Board. Kevin Tan, who helped prepare Singapore's bid for the Botanic Gardens, get listed as a World Heritage Site, never been asked to join the NHB board. The list can go on. And it's just like 10 minutes of work looking at bios, calling friends. If you put 2 days into it, look at the manning of statutory boards, regulatory agencies, you will find the same pattern. What does this do to the country, right? Nobody in their right minds could claim that giving such Singaporeans like Kok Ho a seat at the table would ruin Singapore, far from it. But would they even ruin the careers of the gatekeepers who actively choose not to embrace them? That's a question I think we need to ask ourselves. People who are gatekeepers at various levels. Or maybe those of us who do it are just taking the path of least resistance. Yeah? It's a risk that they could take, they decide not to take. Is there another way? I think there is, right? So I'm very glad to have found a small community of scholars, Academia SG, which tries to practice the other way. Teo Yuan is in the room, Ian Chong is ill, otherwise he'd be here, Linda Lim is in the US, right? So forget about not judging people by the color of their politics. Frankly, we don't even care about the content of their characters, right? When we decide to share people's knowledge and ideas, we simply focus on the content of the ideas. So in 5 years of Academia SG's existence, Yuan, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't recall a single occasion where Linda, Yuan, Ian, or myself ever discussed whether publishing so-and-so or promoting their book or their event would hurt our reputation among the powers that be. Right? Never. It doesn't even cross our mind. I suspect it's because we know we don't actually have that much of a reputation to lose. But on the other hand, we often hear on the grapevine about young scholars getting hints that they should not associate themselves with Academia SG. So that's the game they choose to play, but we don't have to play it. And I think, by the way, this I think is one reason why this book is so important, because it's part of a process of normalizing and mainstreaming dissent. And although many of the activists featured in this book are exceptional, I don't think that their experiences are only relevant to the narrow activist community. Think of them as canaries in the coal mine. The way they are neutralized is symptomatic of a wider problem that I referred to, which is the systematic suppression of the best and brightest in multiple spheres by an over-politicized system. That's the end of my prepared text. I have nothing more to say. Thank you.
Rachel?
Okay. So your question was, who has to do what? To convince who that we are not the enemy.
All that activists have a role.
Yeah. I mean, I think that where we need it most is in educational institutions. We cannot breed, we cannot foster small-mindedness and an inability to tolerate diverse views and different identities and just diversity. But the way we're going in schools, I don't know if we're going, the right direction. So, I mean, when you sent the question earlier, I had a discussion with my partner, and I think we both agreed that, the enemy is really small-mindedness, and that's where what we have to combat. Because it just doesn't lend itself to a plurality of views, to healthy dissent. We all know that in any corporation, in any kind of organizational structure, if there's no dissent and you're only surrounded by yes men, you're running that thing to the ground. So we need to be able to see the country in that same light. That's what I have to say. Yeah.
I'm not sure that it's worth trying to convince anyone who has a certain view of certain people about, that they should be a different color, white instead of gray, or gray instead of black. But I think that what Yuyan and Coco and Sharon have done is to work around the system. And I've also seen, like, I don't know, if Coco was actually invited to sit on one of these boards, would you say yes? I'm not sure. Right? You might not want to play in that because you will be a minority voice. And so I'm not even sure that, that's the end of the world, that you can't make change in some other way. So I take an example of where we, as Aware, Aware is generally not invited by government to sit on any of their committees where they're considering the stuff that we are experts on. For example, gender violence, right? And so they had a committee on family violence and sexual violence, and we are not invited. And of course, initially we're disappointed because we know the stuff. We get calls every single day. We know it more than anyone else. And it is a loss for the country. We could mope about it, but then we realized that some of the people who were in there, and we asked them, hey, how come we didn't make this particular change? And they say, oh, we tried, but then, blah, 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 got outvoted. It was discussed though. And we realized that if we had been in those committees and we had discussed those things, we couldn't now do an op-ed, for example, to critique that decision because we would have to play, but we would have to be a team player, and we were part of that committee that made that recommendation, right? So I think you have to think carefully as well about whether you really need to be in those committees. Yeah, so that's what I would say. Yeah, thanks.
It's already 4 o'clock, so I think we should just go straight into the Q&A, or does Kate talk first?
Kate talks at the last.
Okay, so throw it open. Oh, okay, here, the guy who hated our title.
Yes, Sharon, there was a contributor who didn't like the title. That was me. But by the time I read the email about the title, it was 2 weeks past, and I objected too late. I wrote it. In true contrarian nature, I express my disagreement with the title because I think personally it sets up a dynamic which I don't think is helpful for civil society progress. Right. The first is it begs the question. Who then is the enemy, and why we need enemies? This is a narrative of the state, that there is an enemy and we find it and define ourselves in relation to it. I don't buy that. The second is I don't quite care what they think. I don't care for what they define me as or my work as. I think that there is some rhetorical force in setting up activism in opposition to something for social progress. I say this as someone who's been in civil and political activism, having started the Online Citizen in 2006 and been sued by the government in 2015. I also speak as someone as part of the LGBT community who has also sued the government. So I understand the dynamic of us versus them and how it can be used. But in asking or saying we are not the enemy, we define ourselves in relation to the hegemonic narrative, and I just don't think I don't think that's particularly helpful. I think it gives them a lot more arrogates, a lot more power to them than they deserve. One of the most influential and powerful movements that eventually I think got repealed was Pink Dot. The lawsuits, we kept losing. We lost in 2013. We lost in 2021. But what chipped away at the hegemonic narrative was Pink Dot that went around, over, and above, and never defined itself in contradistinction to what the state thought they were. At least, I don't think so.
I can't think of, I guess, well, if I were to critique the title, I should at least offer an alternative, right? That would be as compelling and as clickbaity as the one that Margie and Connie have chosen, which have brought the crowd. So my proposal for the third book, if we were to do one, and I saw this on a painting at Kathy Teo's place last night, and I thought it was great. It's, if you don't like it, go fuck yourself.
Remy, we will look for you for the third book. Which one first? Okay, Casey, sorry, I'll come back to you as well.
Thank Remy, self, I didn't know you have gone blind, so I can't see. My name is Casey Chew. A past affiliate is past chairman of the substation, large. I'd like to respond to Remy's remarks. I think his points are wonderful and completely valid. And I must say that, on the other hand, I'm the person who strenuously supported Margie and Constance and spoke to Kage that "We Are Not the Enemy" is the best title this can have. So I'll say why. Remy's points are completely valid and they counter my points, but this is the nature of debate. There is not a single truth. The nature of a book on activism is most. Oh.
Yeah. Maybe you try.
Yeah. It is most usefully directed at those whose mind you want to influence. Thanks, Age. So it is less usefully addressed to the converted, right? No point preaching to the converted. You preach to those who are not convinced. You preach to the center. I don't like using the metaphor of this preaching. Let's say you persuade them that what you're advocating is worthy of their attention and is worthy of being, whereas it is not in being now. So, who are you speaking to? Indeed, you are speaking to the authorities, because it is the authorities who believe you are the enemy, or at least act as if you are the enemy, even though they do not believe you are the enemy. They just simply act as if you are. This is the thing that has puzzled me for the last 40 years. Why do the authorities, with whom we share the same agenda of improving Singapore, why do they treat us as the enemy? It is a puzzle that persists. And I think Cherion's point about the blacklist and the grey list and white list is a very insightful point. Indeed, we have to know how things work. And so, if only the title, because we have no time to read the book, we can only read the title. If the title is sufficient to give pause to a low or high civil servant or a low or high minister to say, wait a minute, my God, I didn't realize they were not the enemy. I better change my action and thinking. Okay, so that's the point to the title. I don't want to dominate this, of course, so I'll take my seat, but if I may, just before I go, if you allow me one advertisement relevant to the people in this room. So I'm also the past president of the Harvard Club of Singapore. And in this regard, I like to share that I'm no longer on the committee. because we have term limits. I would like to share that the Harvard Club of Singapore has most recently awarded the HCS Fellow 2024 to Dr. Ang Swee Chai. To those who do not know, Dr. Ang Swee Chai is an orthopedic surgeon, a great humanitarian. She lives and works in England. She is the founder of MAP, M-A-P, Medical Aid for Palestinians. So she is coming to Singapore, and she'll be giving an address at the Harvard Club of Singapore on the 26th of March in the annual dinner. This is a private event. Let me stress, this is a private event. However, if you want to go and listen to her, you may. You must register, you must pay, you cannot be a member of the public walking in. If you want to do that, and it's quite expensive, it's $300 a seat. Yeah, Harvard Club, you know. Contact the organizers who will contact me. I will invite you. Thank you.
Margie, should we take a few more questions? Yeah. So maybe we'll hear your question, then we move on to others and they take together.
Hi. Not working.
Oh, sorry. I think the mic is really not working.
Hello? Okay. Hi, thank you for the book and all the great comments so far. Yeah, I guess I'm Koki. Okay. And yeah, I've been involved with civil society work for about 15 years now. And yeah, I think I also am quite fascinated by the title and wanted to pose the question of, are we comfortable with there being enemies, right? And why do we feel so attached to this idea that we're all working together? I mean, I have great affection for Casey, but I will disagree with you that the government and us have the same agenda. I don't think we have the same agenda. And I think often I worry that civil society is very preoccupied with seeming non-threatening. We are threatening to power, and that's what makes us powerful, right? I don't want, why do we have to dilute our image and be like, oh, we're so friendly, we're loving critics, we all want the same thing, we just have different ways of going about it? No, the reason that some people carrying watermelon umbrellas and walking down the street are arrested or investigated is because it is threatening to power. We are threatening, and that can be a good thing, is just what I would like to propose. Okay.
Okay, hi. My name is Sean. I'm from the public, and yes. Okay, I have a exchange with the activists and those activism during the height of the 2019 extradition bill, and happened in Singapore. In Singapore, the Hong Kong activists, and one of the KOL came, to Singapore to persuade the Singapore Chinese community to think like a communist, the Chinese communists, to support the police. And yet, this group of people, they are getting our Public Order Act to launch a police report on this KOL. And they're making use of the act. So, and they gloat about it, And so in the end, the KOL came, gave a speech, got investigated, and he happens to know the person who is associated with the PSP, a Hong Kong-born citizen, but naturalized Singaporean. And 6 months down the road, when COVID comes in, I raised an issue when, about, how they should not view Singapore itself. I got kicked out. So I used to have a misgiving. I try my best actually to be convinced by your people, what you guys are doing is right. Particularly happened to the current issue of Palestine and Israel. But the actions of certain people I know who supports seems to be on the act, to me, act like an oppressor. I do not know what to think of it. How am I going to be convinced by your people that we work together to make the world a better place? So my question is with all this, so the being oppressed becomes the oppressor in these two incidents that I experienced. How am I going to be convinced that people like me, the public, to feel that your guys are not the enemy of the state? We are here to do something good, not for the state, but for the whole mankind. Thank you.
So that's the first question. One more here.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anne. I'm an educator. My background is I mentor sports coaches, international sports coaches, and I mentor trainee teachers. So my question today is for all the senior activists and experienced activists. Where we are right now presently, we've got a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of experience, and we've got books published. Do you see any opportunity in mentorship, mentoring young activists to keep this sustaining, have a program to keep this conversation going to make our country a better place? Thank you.
Okay, just one more, then we can have 3 questions.
Hi, I'm Kumar from Workers Make Possible. I just wanted to throw another factor into the question of who's the enemy. I think firstly, who are we speaking to, right? When we say we are not the enemy, are we talking to the state or are we talking to the people, right? I think speaking from my organization's perspective, we try to talk to the people, right? And to the people, we are not the enemy. It's very clear, right? We are trying to help workers, advance their own rights and their own aspirations, right? But when we talk about, when we direct it to the state, I think what is missing in the discourse so far is interest, right? What is the state's interest in whatever issues we're talking about? Gender equality, labor issues, we talk about sexuality as well. What is the state's interest? And I think very often we take it for granted that the state wants to help people. But I think we need to be a little bit more critical of that. Very often the state also wants to control. The state also wants to ensure that they're able to reproduce its power. Take migrant workers, for example, we keep talking about the lorry issue. Why is it so hard to ban this practice? Why is it so difficult for a country that enriches itself with so much money, right, and collects billions of dollars in foreign worker levy? Why is it so hard? Because, the bulk of construction projects are owned by the government. They're owned by the public sector. So it's very clear-cut. It's in their interest to keep costs low. So I think I would just like to pose that here, which is that whose interest is it, right? And so I think just to build on what Koki was saying as well, that is why we come off as threatening. Watermelon umbrellas can come off as threatening when you're trying to have an independent discussion about Palestine, right? When you're trying to have any kind of independent discussion, right? That's why one person, putting up a placard is threatening, because suddenly it's not coming from the state, it's coming from actually ordinary people. Yeah, so do you want to say something else? Okay, yeah. That's what I want to ask. So I just want to hear from the panel, how do you factor in the interests, right, of different actors, right? Thank you very much.
Yeah, so in reverse, right, how do we factor in the interests? Then the second question was the mentorship. And then the first question was really, are we really the enemy? We had to ask that question. Yeah. Okay, yeah.
Maybe I'll take the first one. Yeah, I think that's a common, it's a question that is interesting to me because I have heard versions of it before. The question of the oppressor becoming the oppressed. Other variations would be, you're complaining to the elected, but who elected you? So there's a range of that kind of discourse that suggests that, wait, maybe civil society or activists should look at the mirror and realize that we're not that different from, we're as intolerant, for example, as people in power. I think we've got to be careful about some of the sort of slippage of meaning when we transfer it across domains, because yes, of course, civil society members are perfectly capable of, say, bullying people online, right? Shaming them in public, talking down to them. And we see it, we see it online. If you're in the wrong Facebook group and you have overly conservative views, you might be a victim of that kind of intolerance. You could call that oppression. You could, right? But then what word do you use to describe someone being locked up in jail? Yeah? To call them both oppression, that's where it gets start getting misleading. So the truth is that I don't think any civil society group represented here actually does have the power to order someone to come to your house late at night and knock on the door and break it down when necessary, take all your computer devices, search them, put you in, I don't know how long they can hold you for questioning, but they can put you in jail without detention. Nobody here has that power. Yeah? So be careful. I think all of us should be careful when we use terms like, oh, I feel oppressed by civil society. It's a very different kind, qualitatively different kind of oppression from the oppression that people with legal power in their hands are able to exercise. And there's no comparison. It's not even apples and oranges. It's, it's durian and kwachi, right? So and the same goes with, people say that, we complain about power, but the mob can also be powerful, right? The left can be powerful, liberals can be powerful, but it's a completely different kind of power. The words that we use do not become law, right? The words that we use, even if unpleasant, even if shocking, even if unfamiliar, and for some reason umbrellas are seen as threatening, that's not power, that's just influence, right? So it's very different. There are people whose words have power. There are people whose words are law. We are not those people. The people I'm thinking of are elected officials and wives. Honestly, my wife's word is law, right? I'm not complaining. I need it, I need her guidance, right? Then there are, and I've chosen it. There are other people who I've not chosen to give that power to. I've elected them, but they have chosen to take powers to them that kind of violate our constitutional freedoms. Yeah? So their words are powerful in a way that none of our words, fortunately, and we don't even want that power. We just want influence. We just want the right to be able to talk to you. If you don't listen, we want the right, as our friends, Koki and the other gentleman whose name I can't remember, we want the right to be able to, Kumar, thank you, to be able to say things sharply, because the first 10 times you didn't listen, right? And maybe to upset you. But we're not, infringing on your rights. You don't like the sight of those umbrellas, walk away, right? Yes, of course, I understand that some of the words and methods that civil society activists use can be upsetting and sharp, but it's not oppression, is it?
So I'll take question 2 about the mentorship. I can only speak for Pink Dot, but Pink Dot does not do mentorship programs in the formal sense of the word. I have been the product of mentorship from, people who have run Pink Dot from the very beginning. So I guess in some way there is mentorship, but I think it's an area that we're looking into because it's so important for the sustainability of the movement and for, to do capacity building. So it is something that we are looking at. But we are volunteer run and we don't get to do as much as we want to sometimes. So I think sometime in the future there might be something. However, there is maybe just to plug something that's coming up that Pink Dot does not exactly have a hand in, but it's very exciting for the LGBTQ landscape. There is a community center that's coming up, a physical space. And I know that they will be seeking to do a lot more in this area. Yeah.
So we sort of divided the question somehow, but so I'll try to speak to Kumar and Koki's points. I think there are different ways of doing activism in Singapore. There are ways where you want to be more aggressive and assertive and to actually feel like a threat. And there are groups that don't want to do that. I read Rachel's Pink Dot's chapter, and there's I did actually underline this. Adapting to challenges, whether legal, political, or societal, allows Pink Dot to operate on the peripheries without posing a threat to those in power. It is a strategy. It is a valid strategy if your strategy is to move the center. And you're not, and I think partly it's to do with who's this group, what is the identity of this group, what is your strategy? Like I said, Pink Dot played the long game. They knew from the start, we're going to talk about the freedom to love. We are not going to just take on 377A. You only did that in your 14th? 12th year, right? So it's a strategy, right? Aware also is now an IPC, institution of public character. And so there are certain constraints that we work within. But it doesn't mean that we are not aware of certain issues where perhaps it might need a different type of strategy. And what we've tried to do is to empower some smaller groups who can take on some niche areas and use different strategies. So when I looked at the title, I'm like, okay, I liked it a lot. I thought it spoke to not the, unlike Casey, I don't think the government is going to actually think too much about this title. I don't think they're going to actually be reflective about how they're coming across. But I thought that the people in the center would say, oh, that's interesting, right? And I thought that was clever, and for that reason, so I had a very different impression of why this title was quite a good idea. Thank you.
Just since Casey as well as yourself have used the opportunity to advertise events, right? Let me say that Academia SG, if you enjoyed these conversations, we're organizing our very first conference on our 5th anniversary, which is in May, right? So if you've enjoyed this kind of conversation, what we're trying to do is to bring together artists, activists, journalists, politicians, no. But
get a very big venue.
We've got to draw a line somewhere.
Big venue.
We hope we'll get a good big venue. We hope so. The details are on a very bright yellow poster outside at the reception. You can. It's May 6th and 7th. There's even a QR code. Yes, we academics are on with the technology. So please don't miss the bright poster outside. Thank you.
The Cape slide is supposed to come on. The last segment for today is for Hao Lie to come up. Wait, the projector has gone to sleep. Okay, Okay, I'm gonna just show you. Okay, so this is Hao Lie's slide, okay? There's a QR code that I will try to get fixed by the time he ends the conversation, right? So, Hao Lie is a co-founder and current coordinator of CAPE, or the Community for Advocacy and Political Education. It is a youth-led community dedicated to strengthening Singapore's democracy through political literacy and civic capacity building. They were previously a student organization based at Yale NUS College, but is now an independent, non-partisan, volunteer-run community. CAPE has come up with a wonderful handbook that all of you should be holding in your hand. It's a red color book. If you don't have it, please get it from our desk outside. Hao Lie, do you mind coming to here to, yeah. Thank you to the speakers, panelists, yeah. Charian, Rachel, Corina. Hao Lie.
Thank you all very much. Very nice music as well. Hi, everyone. Please don't listen to Casey, and please read more than just the title of the book. And in reading this book, one might be awestruck by the labor, love, and thought that so many generations of Singaporeans have put into the communities and the causes that they serve. And at the same time, one might also be intimidated by all of it, right? Not to mention the risk. And one might think that, oh, this is beyond what I can do. But the fact is, many of us activists here did not begin as activists, right? Here at CAPE, at least, we first and foremost saw ourselves as active and concerned citizens who cared deeply about problems in our society and who wanted to make the change that we wanted to see. I don't think this is much unlike many of the people here today. We all love Singapore and we all want to do good for our communities and for society as good citizens. Some of us as bad citizens, but that's another thing altogether. Right? And one way or another, we stumbled into activism. So we started CAPE in 2017, right? The same year that the first volume of the book, the previous book came out, to respond, back then as CAPE, to respond to a lack of political education among fellow young Singaporeans, and to build the civic and democratic muscles. Yeah. Reading the first volume back then as a younger person with much more worse acne, I too was awestruck by the work of Singapore's incredible activists in the first volume. And never had I imagined that our little idea of CAPE would grow into the force that it is today. And never had I imagined that we would be contributing a chapter to the next volume. 2017 also felt like a different time, right? While activism felt a lot easier back then, there were also fewer young Singaporeans who were interested or engaged in politics or activism. Things have changed on both counts today, right? We've spoken or alluded to this extensively today. There is now a heavier air among civil society, but there is also a spring of fellow young Singaporeans and those who are young at heart who care and want to do something. Right, that is a big difference from 2017 as well. Right, so last year, Ethos and CAPE, as we were, preparing the chapters of this book, we had the idea of putting together an advocacy guide, the one that you see in the beautiful red book that you have in your hands or on your lap, that would accompany this book itself and would bridge the gap between what feels like the impossible and what feels like the unimaginable. After all, what is a laborious tome about the practice of advocacy in Singapore without a much more easier guidebook about how to actually do it, right? So, all right, this little book here, all right, the little red book, condensing academic theory, legal insights, social movement tactics, local case studies, historical timelines, and practical step-by-step action plans. Our handbook covers how civil society in Singapore works and how you too can make the change you want to see. Music again. All right. For many budding Singaporean activists and active citizens who are not content with sleepwalking through life, to borrow from Connie, this is your quick start menu to the possibilities of civic action in our Singaporean context and your stepping stone to new civic adventures. All right, before I turn this over, there are many people whom I need to thank in the production of this beautiful handbook. First, Rukmana Hakim for the really stunning cover design. CAPE usually has very stunning graphic designs, but nothing that rivals the scale of this. My many thanks to the editors at CAPE for your endless support. I would like to thank the team at CAPE for pulling together this handbook across busy work and school schedules, particularly Carol and Daryl in the team here. And finally, I would also like to thank the many generations of activists and community organizers from Singapore and beyond, whose struggles and ideas form the corpus of this handbook. To borrow from my friend, Surendra Kumar, and his chapter, their struggle is ours to continue. Thank you. Thank you.